When I was a kid, my mom managed a camera store. She gave me a camera when I was in grade 9, and that camera was the link between all of my high school science classes and made the science relevant to my interests. Everything for me revolved around that camera.
He gets the paper ready, and that takes maybe a minute, but it seems like a really long time.
See this big thing here? That's the lens. So I'm looking there for you, and just keep looking.
So 1, 2, 3.
Good work!
Wow.
For the last 3 years, there's a festival in Vancouver that's called the Capture Photography Festival. It's a festival that highlights photographers' work in Vancouver and internationally. For the Capture Festival, I had a day of portraits. So I built a room that was 4 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot. I built it out of 2x2s, tar paper, and attached a lens to the side of that little room in the studio. And I made the images using paper negatives in a camera obscura. Camera obscura is Latin for dark room, and the idea of the camera obscura goes back hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. It could go back to Paleolithic times where we were living in caves, and it's entirely possible that a blacked out cave with animal hides may have had a pinhole in it and projected an image onto the wall. Camera obscura was used historically as a perspective training tool where a box was built and a lens or a pinhole was made in that box and an image of the outside world was projected on the opposite wall. Artists would sketch the perspective of the scene that was projected on the other side of the wall. By the time photography was invented, the tool of the camera obscura had been scaled down to something that was a manageable size. And it's not all that different from what we might use in a studio with large format photography. With early photographic processes, you need a room that is dark to process the film or the paper. This camera, being the size it is, allowed me to actually have it function as the darkroom as well. So how the camera functions is the subject is standing outside of the door. I'm standing in the camera and I'm focusing the image on a platform that I'm rolling back and forth within the space itself. That changing of the distance allows for the lens to focus subjects that are at different distances from the lens. I had all of my flashes set up behind a large diffusion panel that was directing light towards the subject. That light was then reflected off the subject through the lens, and that reflected light created the image on the photographic paper.
People are more comfortable seeing images that have been laterally inverted because that's the way they see themselves. So if you look at an image that everyone else prints, you feel that it's a foreign image. It's not a version of you because you see yourself in a mirror. We all do.
The photographic image made it possible for everybody to have a likeness of themselves. The rich, they were the only ones that could contract a portrait to be painted by an artist. If you were a commoner, you wouldn't have any image of yourself. You wouldn't know what your grandfather looked like if he happened to pass before you met him. I wanted to create images with that mentality, where I'd have an open studio day, make it a democratic process of first come, first serve. The process for me was really about looking at the idea of the photographic image, its significance in a cultural context, that a photographic image is so easily accessible now that we take the idea of a photograph for granted. That day of creating pictures of people using really nothing more than bits of wood and some glass, that was exciting for me. And it took me back to when I first saw an image form in a darkroom tray. I set out to build this camera as a personal project, and I wanted to create a body of work that was done blending technologies from different eras. So the idea of the camera obscura is what ultimately led to the photographic cameras that we use today. The idea of looking back at some of the historical processes does broaden the understanding of how photography works. If you understand how something starts, you have a better understanding of how to make something function better in the future. The world needs more visual communicators. The idea of image as language is important. A photograph can communicate an idea without a language barrier. Understanding that sort of universal language is really important.